my view hasn't changed, and I have consistently given colleagues and at least one Prime Minister the advice that they shouldn't worry as much about the newspapers. I think it is the case that politicians have got closer to editors and journalists over the period, and not always to their advantage or benefit, indeed very often the reverse.
I'm sure that there has to be the ability to have a free flow of information between politicians and editors. At least I've always got to be careful about saying that. I think I'm sure, subject to anybody saying anything to the contrary. But is there a distinction to be drawn, and how could it be drawn, between the entirely legitimate interplay and the extent of contact which generates either influence or the perception of influence, of unsatisfactory influence?
Well, I think it is a question of where you draw the line. I think reasonably regular meetings with journalists, particularly when they're on the record, is to be welcomed in an open democracy. But I think that seeing quite so much of journalists or executives from one particular stable or another is not very sensible politics, and isn't a very healthy democratic development over the last few years. I think it's a question, frankly, of, this is an old-fashioned word, I think it's a question very often of how seemly it is for a minister or for a politician to behave in a certain way. And I think to appear to be manipulated by some newspapers or a group of journalists doesn't make very good sense. But people very often refer to the Thatcher years as where all this started. I'm not sure about that. What I am sure about is that there were some journalists she saw a surprising amount of, not because they were supporters, but because she thought they were intelligent and she liked arguing with them. I mean, Hugo Young was a very good case in point. They were chalk and cheese in their political views.
That raises the question of where it went wrong, whether it's a consequence of newspaper people being appointed to communications jobs, or the willingness of politicians to visit editors. Where has it gone beyond what is appropriate? Or
well, I don't think, sir, that you can, that one, I know you weren't doing it, I don't think that one should necessarily blame editors and proprietors and journalists. I think that it's politicians who've been eagerly hitting the ball over the net.